They found the truth at the gate, small, barefoot, and begging. Chief Adewale Okonjo had everything a man could wish for: power, money, and a name that opened doors before he even knocked. Yet every morning that same little boy stood outside his mansion, silent and stubborn, his eyes fixed on the man who pretended not to see him. To the neighbors, it was nothing unusual. A child begging in Lagos was as common as traffic. But this child wasn't begging for food. He was begging for recognition. And one day, when a simple DNA test landed on Chief Adewale's polished desk, all the gates his money had built could no longer keep the truth out. If you love powerful African folktales set in our modern world, like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a story from our rich heritage. Lagos never sleeps. Its air hums with restless horns and hurried footsteps, the smell of roasted corn mixing with the sharp sting of fuel. Street hawkers shout prices over the roar of engines, and the rich glide past in tinted cars, sealed from the noise and dust of the world outside. On Banana Island, where walls are taller than dreams and silence is bought with money, stood the mansion of Chief Adewale Okonjo, a man whose name made small men bow and bold ones whisper. He came from nothing, or so they said. Once a barefoot boy himself in Mushin, he had clawed his way out of hunger with fierce ambition and cold discipline. Now his gates gleamed gold, his house breathed of imported perfume and marble floors. But the warmth that once lived in his heart had long turned to stone. They said he had no time for pity, no ear for the poor, no memory of the past that made him. Inside that mansion, Folake moved like a shadow in silk, beautiful, calm, and distant. Her smile was the kind that never reached her eyes. She had everything a woman could want, yet none of it filled the empty silence between her and her husband. Her prayers echoed through the house at night, soft and trembling, begging for what money could not buy, a child of her own. And every morning, just before the sun melted the mist over the lagoon, a little boy in a torn school shirt stood quietly at their gate. His feet were dusty, his eyes far too old for his small face. He never shouted, never begged loudly, only waited, holding a small wooden carving of a lion tight in his hand. When the maids saw him, they hissed and chased him away with harsh words. But the next day, he came back, and the next. From the back seat of his black Range Rover, Chief Adewale saw him too. Their eyes met once through the tinted glass, one full of pride, the other full of need, and still the man looked away. To him, it was just another poor boy lost in a city's noise. But the old women who swept the streets would whisper as he passed, "A child's cry at your gate is the voice of destiny knocking." Chief Adewale never listened, but destiny has a way of waiting. How long can a man ignore the sound of his own blood calling from the other side of his wall? Chief Adewale Okonjo's story was the kind told with pride in Lagos clubs and boardrooms, but never with truth. He had come from Mushin, from the kind of poverty that smells of smoke and sweat, where hunger taught you to dream fast or die slow. As a boy, he sold sachet water in traffic and slept under leaking roofs. His hands blistered before his voice broke. People said he was destined for greatness, and he believed them. He studied hard, fought harder, and when a scholarship took him abroad, he swore never to return to that life again. Years later, when he came back, he returned not as the boy who left, but as a man who owned buildings that kissed the sky. He invested in land, built estates, bought influence, and wore success like a crown no one dared question. But beneath the polished suits and calm voice was a man hiding from his own past, a scandal he had buried deep enough to think it was gone forever. He thought Lagos had forgotten, but Lagos remembers everything. Folake, his wife, came from a quiet, respected family. Her beauty opened doors, her manners sealed them. But her marriage was built on sand, not love. She lived surrounded by gold and glass, yet her heart was empty. The walls of their mansion echoed with her prayers every night, soft, trembling words for a child that never came. She had tasted the joy of pregnancy 3 times, and each time it ended in silence. Still, she lit her candle at dawn and whispered for a sign, any sign that her womb was not forgotten by heaven. The servants pitied her, though they never said it aloud. She often stood by the window, watching the gates where the small boy waited each morning. There was something strange about him, something her spirit could not ignore. His eyes followed her car every time she passed, filled not with hunger, but with something deeper, something that made her heart skip. His name was Gorede. He was 9 years old, though his face carried the weariness of an old soul. His hair was rough, his uniform torn, and his shoes were long gone. In his small hands, he always held a small wooden carving of a lion, smoothed from years of touch. It was the only thing he owned. He never begged with words, only sat quietly by the gate as if he belonged there. No one knew where he came from, no one asked. But in the evenings, when the air cooled and the street lights flickered on, Mama Ireti, the woman who sold jollof and puff-puff by the roadside, would hand him a small plate of food. She said the boy reminded her of her late son. Sometimes she would look closely at him and mutter under her breath, "This child's spirit is strong. His destiny will shake the rich."
People laughed when they heard her say it. What could a hungry boy do to the powerful Chief Adewale? But Mama Ireti only smiled, the kind of smile that knows more than it says. She has seen enough in Lagos to understand that the gods don't speak twice before they strike. And while the city carried on with its noise and hurry, something quiet and patient was forming between the gates of wealth and the dust of the street. A story waiting for the moment to reveal itself. If the past never forgets, how long before it finds the man who tried to bury it? It was a morning like any other, the sun already burning above the lagoon and the smell of fried plantain drifting through the street. Folake had just returned from church, her white lace gown brushing lightly against the car as she stepped out. Her mind was elsewhere, on another doctor's appointment, another quiet disappointment waiting to be confirmed. As she walked toward the mansion's gate, her handbag slipped from her hand and fell, spilling lipsticks, keys, and a folded note onto the dusty ground. Before she could bend to pick them, a small hand reached first. Korede stood there, quiet as always, his uniform more torn than before, his wooden lion clutched under one arm. He picked up the bag carefully, dusted it as if it were sacred, and stretched it out to her. Their eyes met, hers soft with surprise, his steady and calm, almost knowing. In that brief silence, something stirred inside her, something she couldn't name. The air felt heavier, and though she did not speak, her heart whispered a question she didn't understand. She thanked him gently, but her voice trembled. That night, Folake couldn't sleep. The mansion was quiet except for the hum of the generator and the whisper of her thoughts. When sleep finally came, it brought a dream so vivid she woke shaking. She saw herself standing in a fog-covered field, the cry of a baby echoing somewhere in the mist. She turned toward the sound and saw a wooden lion lying beside a crying infant, its tiny hands reaching out to her. As she bent to lift the child, a voice, deep and ancient, spoke behind her. Blood always finds its home. She woke drenched in sweat, her heart pounding, her eyes fixed on the darkness. In the morning, she told no one, but when she passed the gate again, she slowed her car. Korede was there, sitting, quiet as always, carving something with a small blade. When she looked closer, it was another lion, smaller, but carved with care. He glanced up, smiled faintly, and for a moment, she thought she saw tears in his eyes. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Chief Adewale's peace began to crack. His driver, Kule, had grown restless. One afternoon, when the chief was heading out for a business meeting, Kule muttered under his breath, "Oga, that boy dey stand for gate again, no. It be like in spirit, not the rest." Adewale frowned. What are you talking about? The driver hesitated. Every day they there, sometimes early morning before even the security come out. I don't know where they sleep. Oga, I no like him. He no be normal. Adewale's face darkened. I've told you before. Stop talking nonsense. He's just another street rat looking for pity. But Kule shook his head. No be ordinary pikin, sir. People say he no dey eat, yet he no dey thin. Mama Ireti even say the boy get old spirit. Oga, make we just chase am before he bring bad luck. That was the last straw. Adewale's voice turned sharp. If I see that boy near my gate again, I'll call the police myself. I don't want to hear about him anymore. His words echoed through the compound like a curse. Even the guards fell silent. Later that day, as he stepped out of his car, he met the old woman who swept the street every morning. Her name was Mama Nkem, small and bent, with eyes that had seen too much of Lagos to be fooled by fine clothes. She leaned on her broom and looked up at him. Chief Adewale, you can wash away death, but not destiny. He frowned, ready to walk past, but she continued, be careful which child you turn away at your gate. Not every visitor comes for food. Some come to remind you what you've forgotten. Her voice was soft, but it clung to his ears long after she walked away. That night, when rain started to fall, Adewale couldn't sleep. The thunder outside felt too close, too familiar. Somewhere beyond the walls, a small boy sat shivering under the gate light, clutching his wooden lion tight. What happens when the past you bury starts to wait for you every single morning? Folake's sickness began like a whisper, an ache in her chest, a sudden chill that crept through her bones. But soon, the whisper turned to screams her body could no longer hide. Her skin lost its color, her eyes sank into darkness, and every night she walked trembling, drenched in sweat, calling out to a child that didn't exist. My son, she would mutter, her voice weak, her fingers clutching her belly as though something were clawing from within. The doctors at the private hospital in Ikoyi ran tests, one after another. Each report came back clean, no infection, no trace of sickness. It's stress, they said, maybe depression, but the nurses whispered among themselves. They said they heard her at night talking to someone unseen, pleading softly, as though comforting a baby only she could see. Chief Adewale dismissed it at first. Is the city life catching up with her? He told his driver. Too much church, too many worries. But one evening, as the sun bled red behind the mango trees, Folake collapsed during dinner. The plate shattered and her foot spilled across the marble floor like a sacrifice. She lay still, eyes open, whispering, he's waiting by the gate, he's crying again. In panic, Adewale called in a spiritualist, a man known as Baba Onilu, whose fame stretched from Ibuja to Lagos. The old man arrived before midnight, wrapped in white cloth, cowries dangling from his neck, eyes sharp and ancient. He didn't greet anyone. He simply stood in the compound, lifted his staff and said, there is a voice outside your house that calls for justice. Until it is heard, your peace will not return.
Adewale forced a laugh. Baba, don't start with these superstitions. I built this house with my sweat, not spirits. But Baba Onilu didn't laugh. He pointed his staff toward the gate and muttered, you can block a road but not a path laid by destiny. The one outside is not ordinary. From that night, the mansion began to breathe with something unseen. At dawn, the air turned heavy. Birds stopped perching on the roof. The driver swore he saw footprints, small, muddy ones on the driveway every morning, though no rain had fallen. The security lights flickered without cause, and every time Adewale's car engine refused to start, it was only after the beggar boy Korede passed the gate humming softly that the engine roared to life. At first, Adewale thought it coincidence, but coincidence doesn't happen 3 nights in a row, nor does it whisper your name when you are alone in the study. He began to lose sleep. His business partners withdrew from a multi-million naira real estate deal overnight, claiming they felt uneasy after visiting his office. His bank called about unexplained discrepancies. Doors began creaking open by themselves, and sometimes, in the dead of night, he heard it, soft sobs, like a child crying near the gate. Each time he heard it, he would grip his glass of whiskey tighter, convincing himself it was a cat, or the wind, or maybe his mind. But deep down, something old and forgotten stirred within him. The memories he buried long ago, the kind that rot in the dark, began scratching their way back. Meanwhile, Folake's dreams grew worse. She saw herself holding a baby in one arm and a curved wooden lion in the other. But the lion would bleed, and when she looked up, the baby's face would turn into Korede's, whispering, "Mama, why did you leave me?" She would wake screaming, clutching her chest, gasping for air, her tears soaking the pillow. One night, unable to bear it anymore, she told Adewale, "There's something about that boy. Every time I see him, I feel warmth, not fear. Please let me help him." Adewale's anger rose. "That boy is a curse. Don't bring him near my home again." But that night, the boy did not come to the gate. The mansion grew unbearably silent. Even the crickets refused to sing. The next morning, the driver found dead birds scattered at the gate, and Folake did not wake up. Her pulse was faint, her breathing shallow. The doctors couldn't explain it. Baba Onelu was called again. But before he arrived, Adewale saw something that froze his soul. The wooden carving of a lion lying neatly on his doorstep, wet from the dew, and next to it, a single muddy footprint. And for the first time in years, Chief Adewale felt true fear. He could no longer tell if the boy outside his gate was just a beggar or something far older than time itself. That night, as thunder rolled across the sky, he heard a knock, not at his front door, but at the gate, slow, deliberate, echoing through the compound. Knock, knock, knock. He froze. The air turned cold, and in the distance, a child's voice called softly, "Papa." Was it a dream, or was the past finally standing outside his gate asking to be let in? The night after the knocking, Chief Adewale couldn't sleep. He sat in his study staring at the old clock as it ticked away with heavy, uneven beats. The rain outside had stopped, but his thoughts raged like a storm within him. Each knock from earlier echoed in his chest, louder and louder, until he almost wished someone would come in and end his torment. But no one came. The gate remained still, and the boy was nowhere to be seen. Folake, though weak and pale, had begun to recover slightly. She spent her days moving slowly through the house, her curiosity growing stronger than her fear. Something about Korede wouldn't leave her mind. That small wooden lion, that innocent face, that strange warmth she felt whenever she looked at him. It haunted her even in silence. One afternoon, while trying to tidy the old study, something Adewale hadn't touched in years, Folake's hand brushed across a dusty wooden chest hidden beneath old files and torn envelopes. It was locked, but the key was still hanging on the bookshelf. Inside were photos, letters, receipts, pieces of a past that Adewale had long buried. She began flipping through them absent-mindedly until one photo made her freeze. A woman, young and radiant, stood smiling shyly at the camera. She was wearing a plain wrapper, her belly swollen with pregnancy. The name written on the back in Adewale's handwriting said, "Shade." Folake's fingers trembled. She stared closer. There was something in that woman's eyes, that same softness, that same shape she'd seen before. Slowly, she reached for her phone and pulled up a picture she had secretly taken of Korede from her car window. The boy by the gate holding his wooden lion. Her breath caught. The resemblance was chilling. The same nose, the same eyes, even the same faint scar near the lip. She sat down hard, the air leaving her chest. "No," she whispered. "It can't be." But the more she looked, the more the truth pressed itself into her bones. That night, while Adewale was away on a business trip to Abuja, Folake called Mama Ireti, the food seller, who often spoke kindly of the boy. When Mama Ireti arrived, her eyes widened at the mansion, but Folake wasted no time. "Madam, that boy, Korede, who are his people?" Mama Ireti sighed deeply. Madam, nobody know where the boy come from. Oh. He just start coming one day, always sitting near this your gate.
He never beg too much. He just waits. I ask him before, and he say he no have mama or papa. He only say, my papa lives here. Those words pierced Folake like a blade. Her knees went weak. She thanked the woman, gave her some money, and closed the door slowly. The boy's words replayed in her mind again and again. My papa lives here.
She spent the whole night pacing. She needed proof, something beyond fear and coincidence. So she took a bold step. The next morning, while pretending to take food to the gate, she noticed Korede had left behind an old spoon beside the gutter, a small bent one he used when Mama Reti gave him rice. Folake wrapped it carefully in a piece of white cloth and sent it to a private lab her friend managed in Ikui. Days crawled by. Adewale returned, acting normal, unaware of what storm was brewing under his roof. But guilt began to gnaw at him. Every time he saw Folake, he thought of Sadi, the girl from years ago, the one he cast aside when she told him she was pregnant. He was younger then, reckless and proud, just starting to climb Lagos's corporate ladder. Sade had been a maid at his uncle's house, barely 20. Her laughter had been soft, her eyes full of dreams. He told himself it was love, but when she came with news of the pregnancy, fear of scandal drowned his conscience. He paid her off, sent her away to her village, and swore to never think of her again. But he did think of her, especially the day he received the letter, written by a nurse from a government hospital. Madame Sade died during childbirth. No family came for the body. He had read it once, then burned it. He never asked about the child, never cared to know if it lived or died. He thought time would erase it all. But time, as the old people say, only buries shame until the ground is ready to spit it back out. Now, sitting across from Folake at dinner, he noticed how she watched him, silent, calculating, a trace of hurt behind her calm face. She asked softly, Adewale, who was Sade? The fork froze halfway to his mouth. What are you talking about? That name, where did you hear it? She smiled faintly, a smile that held more pain than joy. I found her photo in your chest. She was pregnant. Was she yours? He stood up immediately, anger covering his fear. Are you going through my things? She didn't answer. She only looked at him, then at the wooden lion she now kept beside her bed. You should tell me the truth before the spirits do, Adewale. That night, he left the room in silence, but his dreams were not silent. He saw Sadi standing by the gate, holding a baby. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale like moonlight. She said only one thing before disappearing. You promised you'd take care of him. By morning, Folake received a call. The DNA result was ready. She held the envelope for a long time, her hands shaking. She knew what it would say, but knowing was not the same as reading. When she finally tore it open, the words struck like lightning. 99.9% paternal match. Chief Adewale Adeyemi. The room spun. The air grew cold. Outside, the wind blew, whistling through the mango trees. And from the gate came a sound that made her blood freeze once more. Korede's voice, calling softly, Mama, can I come in now? But before she could move, a shadow passed by the window, small, barefoot, and followed by another, taller, slower, and dripping wet like it had just crawled out from the grave. Was it Korede, or had something else come with him? Folake stood in the middle of the room, her whole body trembling. The paper in her hand felt heavier than gold, heavier than truth itself. The words on it burned her eyes. 99.9% paternal match. She couldn't breathe. Her knees shook as she whispered to herself, He's his son, Adewale's son. The walls of the mansion seemed to close in on her, the chandeliers above flickering as though the house itself felt the weight of the secret now uncovered. When she heard Adewale's footsteps approach from the hallway, she folded the paper tightly into her palm. He entered, dressed neatly in his white agbada, smelling of cologne and pride. His voice was firm, impatient. "Folake, what is this talk about you calling that boy my son? Have you lost your mind?" She lifted her eyes slowly, her voice cold. "I have proof, Adewale, proof that you cannot hide from." He frowned, but she opened her hand and dropped the DNA result on the table between them. The paper fluttered softly, but his sound felt like thunder in the quiet room. Adewale's face went pale as he read the words. He blinked, his lips parting, but no words came. Then, suddenly, he laughed sharp, loud and hollow. "That street rat? My son? Never, never!" His hand slammed against the table, the sound echoing through the house. "Do you know who I am, Folake? You think I'd let a dirty boy from the gutter carry my blood?" His voice rose with anger, but his eyes betrayed something else. Fear. Folake's tears fell quietly. "You can deny the paper, you can deny me, but you cannot deny what is already living in your blood. You left that child to suffer, Adewale, and now destiny has brought him back to your gate." He turned away, pacing, shaking his head violently. "I don't believe this. Someone must have tampered with it. It's a lie. It's all a lie." But his voice trembled. Deep inside, a buried guilt began to claw its way to the surface. That night, that girl, that memory he thought was dead. He could still see Sade's face, pale and weak, whispering his name in the dark before she was taken away. He'd paid the nurse to bury everything, but destiny doesn't stay buried. The rain began again outside, soft at first, then heavy, beating against the glass windows like a warning. Folake sat down, her body shaking. She whispered to herself, "You brought this on yourself, Adewale. You turned your back on your own flesh." Adewale stormed out, slamming the door behind him, muttering curses under his breath. He needed air. He needed to think. But as he stepped out towards the gate, lightning split the sky. The guards were shouting. Something was happening outside. Lying at the edge of the gate, in the muddy water, was Korede. His small body was soaked, his lips pale, his breath weak. The wooden lion was still clutched tightly in his hand. The guard said he had been standing there for hours in the rain, waiting. Then he collapsed.
Adewale froze where he stood, his chest pounding. For the first time in his life, fear gripped him like a living thing. He rushed forward but stopped halfway, torn between pride and panic. The boy's tiny fingers twitched, his lips whispering faintly, "Papa?" Folake ran past him, kneeling beside the child, lifting his head onto her lap. "Korede, my son, can you hear me?" Her tears mixed with the rain, washing the dirt from his face. But Adewale just stood there, motionless, helpless, his throat tight, his heart refusing to speak the truth, his tongue denied. The lightning flashed again, throwing his shadow long and twisted across the wet ground. The boy's hand slipped from Folake's grip, his breathing shallow, his eyes rolling back. She turned to Adewale and screamed through her tears, "If he dies here tonight, will you still deny him then?" The thunder swallowed her words, and in the flash of light that followed, Adewale thought he saw another figure standing by the gate, a woman in white, her eyes sad and accusing. Her lips moved without sound, but he understood the message clear as day. "You buried me once, Adewale. Will you bury him too?" And as the wind howled through the compound, Koride's small hand went still. Was it the end of the boy's suffering, or just the beginning of Adewale's curse? The night stretched long and heavy, the rain refusing to stop. Folake's cries broke the air as the guards helped lift Koride's frail body into the back seat. Adewale hesitated, his legs rooted to the ground, but her scream snapped him out of himself. "Adewale, get in the car," she shouted, voice trembling with fury and desperation. He followed, his face pale, his mind spinning. The car sped through the flooded streets of Lagos, wipers slashing back and forth like restless spirits. At the hospital, the bright lights felt too harsh. Nurses rushed in, calling for drips and oxygen. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. Falake clutched her chest, whispering prayers under her breath, while Adewale stood at the corridor window, staring into nothing. For the first time, silence followed him. No phone calls, no assistance, no respect. Just the sound of a small boy fighting for breath. When the doctor finally came out, his expression was grief. He held a familiar file in his hand. Chief Adewale, he began quietly. We ran another test to confirm the child's blood type for transfusion, and he opened the file slowly, turning it toward him. This boy carries your blood. Adewale's breath caught. The file trembled in his shaking hands. The words on the paper blurred through his tears. Every wall he'd built, every lie he'd told himself, crumbled in that single moment. He sank onto the chair, covering his face with his hands. His voice broke. God, what have I done? Memories crashed into him like thunder. His own childhood in Mushin, the hunger, the nights he slept without food, his mother's voice whispering, never forget where you came from. But he did forget. He buried that boy, same as he buried Sade, and now his own son lay fighting for life in a public hospital, just as she had died in one. Falake stood beside him, her tears softer now. She said quietly, he is still your son, but the gods of the land, they remember. You ignored a child's cry at your gate, and now that cry has entered your house. Outside, dawn broke slowly over Lagos. The city didn't stop for anyone. Cars honked, traders shouted, life moved on. But at the hospital, everything had changed. A nurse rushed in with a phone. Chief, there's news. It's everywhere. On the screen, headlines flashed across social media. Wealthy businessman's hidden son found begging at his gate. Lagos reacts. Reporters camped outside the hospital, cameras flashing, people chanting, justice for the boy. Adewale's empire began to crumble before his eyes. Investors poured to withdraw. His company's stock dropped overnight. His mansion was surrounded by reporters and curious onlookers. Some whispered that his downfall was spiritual. Others said it was karma. He couldn't speak. He just sat in that cold hospital chair, his fine clothes drenched with shame, his eyes on the ward door. Every second felt like a lifetime. He thought of all the men he'd stepped on to rise, all the hearts he'd hardened to survive. He thought he had conquered Lagos. Now Lagos had turned its eyes on him. And somewhere down the hall, machines beeped faintly. A child was breathing, barely. The doctor returned once more, voice low. Chief, we've done all we can. What happens next? He didn't finish the sentence. Adewale's chest tightened. He pressed his hands together, whispering prayers he hadn't said in decades. Let him live, he murmured, his voice cracking. Let him live, and I will make it right. But faith is not a coin you can buy back with promises. As the morning sun touched the hospital window, Falake turned to him, eyes red, voice shaking. Maybe this is the price of pride, Adewale. Maybe the gods are finally collecting what you owe. He looked at her, speechless, broken, and for the first time in his life, truly afraid. The nurse ran from the ward, breathless, eyes wide. Madame, Chief, the boy. Her words caught in her throat, and at that moment, the world seemed to stop. Did Korede's heart finally give up? Or was this the beginning of something far beyond what either of them could control? The day Chief Adewale Okonjo finally opened his gate, the whole street froze. Even the wind held its breath. The boy stood there, thin, dusty, and shaking, his eyes wide like he couldn't believe the man before him was real. Adewale's voice trembled as he said, "Come in, Korede." Those 3 words carried the weight of years of pride, denial, and silent guilt that had rotted his soul from the inside. Korede didn't move at first. He only looked past the man, into the grand compound that had once rejected him like a stray dog. Then slowly, his small feet crossed the threshold. The gatesman who had chased him away so many times now bowed his head. It was the first time anyone had seen Chief Adewale cry.
Folake came out, her wrapper tied loosely, her eyes red from sleepless nights. She didn't say a word, just knelt and opened her arms. The boy hesitated, then ran into them.
It was the kind of embrace that made the air heavy, the kind that made even the house seem to sigh in relief. That night, they washed Korede, dressed him in soft clothes, and fed him until he fell asleep in Folaki's lap. The mansion that had once echoed with pride now smelt of forgiveness. Days passed, and people began to whisper. Some said Chief Adewale had been cursed until he accepted the boy. Some said the spirit of Korede's late mother had returned justice to the land. But Adewale didn't care what they said anymore. He sold his most expensive car and donated the money to children's homes across Lagos. He started walking through the market without his usual convoy, shaking hands, greeting children, smiling like a man trying to make peace with something unseen. Still, something about Korede unsettled him. The boy was quiet, too quiet. Sometimes at night, he would sit by the gate, humming softly, his eyes fixed on the road as if waiting for someone. When Folake asked him what he was doing, he would just smile and say, "Mama is almost home." One evening, thunder rolled across the sky and Korede woke up screaming. He said he saw his mother at the gate again, smiling through the rain. Folake rushed to hold him, whispering, "It's just a dream, my son." But when Adewale went to check the gate, he stopped dead in his tracks. The ground was wet from the rain, except for one spot where 2 barefoot prints led to the gate and stopped there. The next morning, Korede seemed calmer, almost peaceful. At breakfast, he looked at Adewale and said, "Baba, Mama said thank you." Adewale's spoon fell from his hand. "What do you mean, Korede?" But the boy only smiled. That night, Adewale couldn't sleep. He walked through the silent halls of his mansion, each room whispering old sins. When he reached Korede's door, he paused. The window was open, the curtains fluttering. The bed was empty. And on the pillow, a small clay charm lay. A charm his late lover once wore around her neck, the same one that was buried with her. Chief Adewale fell to his knees, his breath frozen. Was Korede ever truly his, or just the last messenger of a love he had buried alive? In Lagos, wealth builds fences so high that even shame cannot climb them. Yet destiny knows which gates to knock on. Chief Adewale learned this when the silence in his mansion began to speak. At first, it was only the faint sound of a child's laughter drifting through the corridors at night. Laughter that didn't belong to Korede or any living soul. Then, sometimes Folake would find the boy's footprints leading to the same gate where everything began. Wet, fresh, though he was asleep in his bed. Neighbors whispered that spirits had entered the Okonjo house. Some said it was the woman Adewale wronged coming to reclaim what she lost. Others said it was a warning that no matter how clean you wash your hands, the past will always find the stain. But the chief said nothing. He spent his nights by the window, watching the moonlight fall across the gates, the same place where pride once blinded him. Korede was changing too. He grew quieter, his gaze deeper, as if he carried 2 worlds in his small heart. One evening, he looked up at Adewale and said softly, "Mama said the gate must never close again." Then he smelled, the same smell his mother had worn that first day he denied her. The words haunted Adewale like an old curse he couldn't undo. Weeks turned into months. People who used to bow at his sight now looked at him differently. They said the chief had become a humble man, maybe even a good one. But deep inside, he knew the truth. Goodness born out of guilt is still a wound. One Harmattan morning, as dust floated like ghosts over the city, Adewale called his driver and told him to take down the front gate completely. If destiny ever returns, let it walk in freely. From that day, children from the streets came in to eat, to play, to learn. Folake helped them like a mother who had waited her whole life for them. The mansion that once symbolized pride became a refuge. But one truth never left his heart. The night Korede disappeared, the clay charm on his bed still warm, as though someone had just taken it off. And every night since, when the wind passes through the open compound, Adewale hears a soft voice whisper near his ear, "The door that rejected you has now opened." In Lagos, money can buy silence, but not peace. Wealth may build walls, but destiny always finds the gate it seeks. The elders say, a man who forgets his roots will one day be buried by them. And as you listen to this story, think carefully. If you were Chief Adewale, would you open your gate or drive past? Thank you for walking this long road with us, through pride and pain, through the whispers of Lagos nights where spirits remember what men forget. This was not just Chief Adewale's story. It is every man's mirror, every woman's silent warning, every child's cry waiting at a closed gate. In our world, the rich build fences to keep the poor away, but destiny walks barefoot, uninvited, until it finds the one heart still beating with guilt and grace. When the mansion finally grew quiet, people said the wind carried a blessing through it. Some nights, the gate would creak open by itself, though no one touched it. And sometimes, those who passed by swore they saw a boy sitting there, smiling faintly beneath the mango tree, waiting for no one and everyone at once. They called it the Gate of Mercy. Others said it was cursed. But maybe it was just destiny, reminding us that what we give away in arrogance, life returns in truth. So as you listen now, remember, every small act of kindness opens a door to destiny. The stranger you ignore today may carry the key to your redemption tomorrow. Do not wait until guilt becomes your only prayer. If this story touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let these stories live beyond words. Let them awaken something inside of you. Because every story told keeps the ancestors listening, and every listener becomes part of the tale. And next, we go deeper into another shadow of truth, where love turns into mystery and silence hides a deadly secret. The housemaid who vanished after her employer's wedding night, and the secret hidden in her diary. Will you dare to open it?